Hey, welcome, allied dads. Today, we're going to dive into the fascinating world of social dynamics. We're going to explore the Karpman Drama Triangle, a model first described by Stephen Karpman in the 1960s. So this model helps us understand dysfunctional social interactions and the power games we often find ourselves and play within. So, Eric, can you tell us more about the roles involved, and more importantly, how that's going to be useful to know from an allied dad's perspective?
Yeah, that's exactly the question. So I'm going to pull up a graphic here on the screen. So the roles are persecutor, rescuer, and victim. And so as we go along in this episode, we're going to be detailing each one of those roles with the goal of helping you as our listener kind of identify if you're falling into one of these roles and what the implications of that are.
Hello, I'm Steve.
And I'm Eric, and together we are two dads with one mission.
Welcome to the Allied Dads podcast. This is the show for dads, all about fatherhood, faith, and freedom, one conversation at a time. Okay, so let's start with this role of the victim then. So the victim often feels kind of trapped and powerless. They're often blaming their circumstances on others.
Right.
Or on their particular situation. You know, they tend to seek a rescuer to solve their problems, which can prevent them from often taking responsibility for making positive changes. I mean, for me, just that concept of that victim role, it just defines that cause and effect equation we spoke about on an earlier episode. Yeah. So, hey, if you're tuning in and you missed that episode, go tune in where we spoke about cause and effect, where people are blaming their circumstances, kind of outside of themselves. Yeah. I mean, what else do you have to say and just add to about that victim role there?
So, the victim role, it's fairly easy to identify because you'll hear it in people's language. That they're saying kind of those real concrete terms like always and never, and and then it's always kind of turned inward, right? Like this person always does this to me, or I always suffer in some way, those kinds of things. And it's always, them kind of projecting that, these things are always happening to them, or why is this always happening to me, that kind of thing. And so you'll hear that. And, I guess I would challenge our listeners, is that who you want to be? Do you want to be a victim in life? Okay. I think probably most of our listeners aren't victims, but I think also what I try to stay aware of for myself is to not, because that victim mentality can kind of creep in real small ways. If something bad happens or something, it's easy to kind of slip, even if just a little bit, and be like, like, woe with me, instead of being, all right, that's a challenge. What do I need to do to overcome it or fix it or whatever? So it's really just looking at your mindset.
Yeah. So what's the next role then, Eric?
Yeah. So let's talk about the rescuer. And this is a, oops, sorry about that. This is a big one for men, because when we hear people talking about a problem, we just naturally want to jump in and we grab our tools and we want to fix the problem, right? And oftentimes people don't want, they don't either want your help or they're not looking for a solution. They just need to vent. And so if they're just venting because they're frustrated or whatever, and then all of a sudden we're jumping in as the rescuer, unwanted, well, that creates potential drama. Right? So I know that as I've kind of grown and matured and gained wisdom as a man, I try to be very conscious of, does this person really want my help? And so the easiest way to determine that is to simply ask questions. Instead of just, immediately offering advice to somebody, ask them a question like, what have you tried that might help that? Or what do you think would help that? Those kinds of things. Or are you looking for help? And sometimes, hey, the best thing to do is just listen to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Just, that is just a prime example of, if in doubt, shut up and
Hey, and I'll
listen.
tell you, so in my personal Bible reading, I happened to be in the book of Job, and nobody had friends as good as Job. Even though they were wrong, they sat down with him. So that, if you're not familiar with Job, Job lost everything, lost his kids, lost his wealth, lost everything. And he's basically sitting in ashes with boils all over his body, and like he's in a miserable state. And 3 of his friends come and sit with him in silence for 7 days. Like, that's crazy. Who does that? Mm-hmm. But they had enough wisdom to just sit with their friend and not offer advice and just listen. Now, eventually they did, but still, 7 days of silence. Holy cow. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's huge power in listening, and it's one of the reasons why God in His greatest wisdom gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth. That basically means you should be listening twice as much as you talk.
Yeah, fast to listen, slow to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the next one. So we've got this persecutor role.
Yeah, so for me, Eric, persecutors, they're often critical in setting kind of the strict boundaries and prioritizing their own wins. They can be quick to blame the victim and criticize the behavior of the rescuer as well. This can result in maintaining control, but often without providing constructive solutions.
Right. And so I think that especially in the adult world, when you hear people talk about them feeling like they've been bullied, well, that's usually because there's somebody that's in that persecutor role, and the person that's saying they're being bullied is oftentimes the victim. Okay, so that's and just to kind of give an overview of, we're probably halfway through this episode. The idea here is we want our listeners to be able to raise their own awareness of who they might be in this drama triangle, and then really just challenge yourself. Do I want to be the victim? Do I want to be the rescuer? Do I want to be the persecutor? Personally, I don't want to be any one of those 3. And so by raising the awareness, once you get really good at this, you'll see these various roles from a mile away, and you'll either recognize it in yourself right away, or you'll recognize it in others very quickly, and you can kind of remove yourself from the drama triangle. So that's kind of the ultimate goal in us talking about this, is because again, especially for men, it's easy for us to be that rescuer. I think men that play the victim, that's kind of that's probably not our listener. I kind of hope it's not our listeners. But being the rescuer, and sometimes even being the persecutor, because we want to fix things, and so we kind of start telling people what to do and pressuring them. Sometimes, it's easy for us to fall into that as men. So awareness is really what we're about. So I'm curious, Steve, are you, is there any situation in your life right now where you maybe can kind of see a drama triangle happening?
Yeah. Well, I can definitely see a drama triangle. So, news to our listeners, but obviously you and I know I've kind of taken on some temporary work at the moment, and so in my workplace, which is kind of it's a really interesting environment. I'm new in role, so everyone talks around the new guy, but certain colleagues that I'm working alongside, talk about some of kind of the supervisors and managers in a certain way. It's like, and it's really interesting when you say, you always know the victim, because they always talk in a certain language. It's like always, it's all the time, always. Those managers, everyone around here, it's like, he's always, picking on me. So yeah, there's kind of I can see some victims there, and just in response to knowing the victims, they can't kind of name the persecutors as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If they're talking about, either a supervisor or line manager, is always, it's almost like they're always picking or bullying on me, and I'm expected to do all this work, and they're on their 10th break of the night, things like that.
Right. It's always like it's real. Everything's kind of exaggerated or extremes,
Yeah, and it's really easy. Now, why are they having these conversations with me? And I know why. It's because they're trying to drag me into their drama triangle.
That's exactly it.
And I refuse to enter the triangle.
Misery loves company, right? So they're,
yeah,
as a victim, they're miserable and they're trying to drag you in with them.
Yeah, they're trying to drag me into the triangle, and I always refuse. I mean, I even point blank say to people, and I just, it's just curious. But I've said this out loud many times, like, you know, I'm not entering into your drama triangle, because obviously I clearly know the drama triangle, and no one has ever said to me, "What's the drama triangle, Steve? What are you talking about?" It's just like, you know, I'm not entering into your drama triangle. I choose not to get involved. You know, I'm going to remain neutral. So that's kind of how. There's a little tip for you guys as well. That's how I stay out of a drama triangle. Is I just refuse. I choose not to enter into other people's drama triangles. I'll listen. You know, I'm quite happy to listen, but you know, I won't become, you know, one of the other roles in that triangle and join the triangle. I'll stay on the outside, you know, looking in.
I'll tell you where you'll see a drama triangle every day at any moment in time is just going on Facebook and looking for posts, and you know, somebody says something that's maybe polarizing, and then people come along and they're persecuting the poster, and then there's people that play the victim, and it's just it just plays out in kind of a little microcosm all the time.
Yeah, so where the social dynamics is up to at the moment, it's too early to get conclusion into the triangle. So haven't yet figured out who the rescuer is. They're trying to recruit me to either become the rescuer or join their victim movement. And like I say, I'm just looking on the outside of the triangle with unique curiosity, because I love social dynamics and psychology, and you know, all of the psychological things that are going on. It's like it's psychological warfare in the workplace.
It really is
to watch.
And I'll take a minute here to talk about something that's happening in my life that is even more complex, because there's more players. And that's the thing with the drama triangle. It's not always just 3 players. It's not always as clean as that. So I've got a family situation going on with my daughter and her boyfriend, and then my ex, and the boy's father and the boy's mother, and the mother's trying to drag my daughter into, you know, she's kind of the victim, and she's trying to pull my daughter in, and the father is trying to make sure his son is not pulled in, and then I kind of come into this situation because I'm concerned about my daughter, and so I'm really it's one of the more challenging drama triangles that I've encountered in my life. It's kind of delicate because there's children involved. You know, if it's just adults, you can kind of just cast somebody off or tell them off, or just not, you know, it's a little easier. But when there's children involved, it's a different dynamic. So without going into like all the details, I just want to say that I'm thankful for my knowledge of this concept of the drama triangle, because it helps me maintain my self-awareness in how I'm interacting with all the players. And it's keeping me, it's kind of like surfing, right? When you surf, you got to stay above the water, because if you crash, then it's all the, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I want to stay above all that. And it takes, you know, a concerted effort sometimes. So I want to pull up a graphic real quick just to help, or, you know, if you happen to be watching this as a video, just take a look at this. I'll leave it up here. So it really describes each role in a little more detail. So the rescuer is, you know, kind of like quote unquote saves people, you know, that he sees as vulnerable. They're hardworking, that kind of thing. The persecutor is really unaware of their own power. So sometimes it is a boss or a supervisor, and so they oftentimes discount, or, you know, their power is used in a negative or destructive way. And then the victim is like this overwhelmed person. You know, they're vulnerable. And the big thing here is really they don't take responsibility, because it's one thing to be a victim. Sometimes it's legitimate, right? Something happens to you, you're the victim. Well, now what, right? Are you going to stay there and wallow in your victimness, or are you going to take steps and change your life? So that is really the essence of what we're trying to put across in this podcast. In the show notes, you'll see a link to the actual Karpman Drama Triangle website. And there's, you know, if this interests you and you want to go deeper, there's a ton of information there. Lots of lots of downloads and, you know, explanation type things. So it's a good resource if you want to look into it further. Any parting thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, my parting thought, I mean, if I could, you know, impart, you know, one little nugget of information, you know, knowing the triangle, and as Eric said, being unaware of it, you know, described it as kind of these ripples, like this ripple effect as well. It's like, you know, you want to stay out of a triangle.
Yeah.
So once you identify and you can see those roles, you want to stay out of the triangle. I mean, you know, the quality of your life is directly proportional to the amount of time you stay out of the triangle.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think that there's another level to it where if you really care about the other players that are in that triangle, you're not helping them by being the persecutor or the rescuer or the victim, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you really care about those people, then stand up and do things the right way, you know?
Yeah. And how best can you help people who are stuck in that triangle? It's really simple. And it's, you know, anything in life, if you want to basically, you know, have a more positive impact, it's like ask better questions.
Oh, thank you. Because I was just, if you, I didn't know what you were going to say, but if you didn't actually clarify, I was going to say the quality of your life is dictated by the quality of your questions. That's kind of a mantra, you know, one of the many mantras that I live by is like the quality of your questions will dictate the quality of your life. So if you want to help people, ask them good questions, because what that'll do is it'll draw out what they probably already know. And then it'll help them kind of take ownership for who they are. So if they're, you know, if you see somebody being a persecutor, ask them a good question that's relevant to whatever the situation is, and maybe help them kind of become aware.
Yeah, and there's a great topic for a future podcast episode as well, Eric. You know, questions are the answer, where we can maybe talk about some great questions that, you know, you can be asking, you know not only other people, but, you know, ask yourself from time to time to improve the quality of your life. You know, speaking of future episodes, what's coming up next, Eric?
Yeah, so the next episode, we're going to talk about learning to trust yourself.
So learning to trust yourself. And how can people find out more about us, Eric?
Yeah, so our website is simple. It's allieddads.com. And come there, you can find out a lot about us and find out our other social links. We'd love to have you reach out to us if you have anything you'd like us to talk about. We'd love to hear about it, and we can talk about it if it makes sense.
Yeah, please do reach out to us if you've got ideas for a future episode or some burning topic that you'd just like us to drill down, you know, and provide more information on. We're always happy to kind of, you know, ad lib and go unplugged with a sort of one of our listeners generated topics and ideas. But in the meantime, you know, the best place to find us and go and subscribe, you know, hit those bell buttons is on your favorite streaming channels.
Yep, absolutely. And check us out on YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't already.
See you on the next episode.
All right, take care.